My female boss refused to book my flight for a $5 million deal. She insulted me, why bring trash? LOL, but I knew something she didn't. The client's CEO is my brother. You won't believe what happened when my female boss tried to sabotage a $5 million deal. I was working at a fast-paced tech firm, and everything was going smoothly, until the day I needed her help with a major flight booking. Sounds simple, right? But when I asked her to book a flight for me to meet a key client, she flat out refused. Her words, why bring trash? I was shocked not just by the insult, but by how dismissive she was about the deal that could change everything for the company. She didn't even seem to care about the importance of the meeting or the money at stake. But what she didn't know was that the client I was meeting wasn't just anyone. It was my brother, the CEO of the company we were negotiating with. It was a delicate situation. I had to walk a fine line, managing my professional role while keeping this family connection a secret. My boss had no idea who she was dealing with. Little did she know, this meeting was more than just about business. It was about proving myself in a world where respect was hard to come by. But as tensions rose and the pressure built, I realized something much bigger was on the line than just a flight booking. What would happen when my boss found out the truth? Would the deal go smoothly, or would everything fall apart? Stay tuned to find out how this all plays out. The tension started building right away. My boss Karen had always been difficult. Don't get me wrong, she was a hard worker, but she had this way of talking down to people, especially when she felt she was in control. And when it came to me, I was always the underling in her eyes, no matter how much I contributed to the company. It had been like this from day one, but this time things were different. This wasn't just about me. It was about an opportunity that could change my career and bring my family into a spotlight that no one expected. It wasn't the kind of thing I could just let slide. I spent the next few hours feeling completely torn. I was furious at how Karen had treated me, but I couldn't let her know that. I couldn't let anyone see how badly her words stung, especially when she had no clue about the connection I had with the client. The last thing I wanted was to create a scene or let the situation escalate. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to come back to bite me in ways I couldn't predict. The client I was supposed to meet was my brother, James. We hadn't always been close, but we'd started to build a better relationship over the years. He was the CEO of a rapidly growing tech company, and he was known for making sharp business moves. What most people didn't know was that we shared a complicated history, one that neither of us liked to talk about. But the deal we were negotiating was big, bigger than anything I'd ever worked on, and it had the potential to not just make our company a lot of money, but also set me on a new career path. This was my chance to prove myself. When I got home that night, I texted James, telling him the flight situation was up in the air. He texted back almost immediately, asking if I was okay. He could tell something was off. I thought about how to explain it to him, but I didn't want to cause any unnecessary drama. After a few minutes of thinking, I decided to just tell him the truth, without going too deep into my own frustrations. Karen's being difficult, I said, but don't worry, I'll get it figured out. James replied with a simple, got it. Let me know if you need anything. It wasn't much, but it felt like the weight had been lifted off my shoulders, at least for that moment. Still, something about the situation was bugging me. I couldn't help but wonder if Karen's attitude toward me would continue to affect the deal in ways I couldn't anticipate. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, hoping to catch Karen before the day got too busy. I had a plan, a backup flight I could book on my own, just in case she refused to cooperate again. As I walked into her office, I could see she was already in a bad mood, looking over some spreadsheets on her desk. Morning, Karen, I said, trying to sound casual. She glanced up but didn't greet me. What is it now? She asked, her tone sharp. I hesitated, but then decided to approach it head-on. I need to book my flight for the client meeting. The one with James, my brother. She froze for a second, clearly not expecting that. The color drained from her face, and for a brief moment, I could see her calculating how to respond. She opened her mouth, probably to say something dismissive, but instead she closed it. Fine, she said, her voice tight. I'll do it, but don't expect any favors. And next time don't pull the family card in front of me. It won't help you. Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. Thanks, I said, keeping my voice steady. I walked out of her office with a sigh, but that sense of unease never left. Karen had made it clear that she wasn't going to make this easy. And worse, I wasn't sure if she was already starting to doubt my professionalism because of the family connection. The day dragged on as I focused on finalizing the details for the meeting. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about how Karen might react once she figured out who James really was. If she found out the truth, she might change her mind and cancel the deal. I couldn't afford for that to happen. Around lunchtime, I decided to call James. I needed to touch base with him, especially after what had happened with Karen. He answered on the first ring. Hey, how's everything going on your end? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. All good, he said. How about you? You seem off today. I chuckled softly. Yeah, I'm dealing with some stuff at work. Nothing major, just a little tension. Is Karen being difficult? He asked, as if he already knew the answer. I sighed. You could say that. She still doesn't know about our connection, and I'm trying to keep it that way for now. He paused for a second. Listen, if you need me to step in, I can. I don't want her messing things up for you. No, it's fine, I said quickly, even though I was beginning to feel like I was in way over my head. I've got this. I just need to keep things cool until the deal is locked in. But thanks for offering. Anytime, he said, his voice full of understanding. Just make sure she doesn't get in your way. I know how she can be. The conversation ended, but it didn't help the nerves that were building inside me. Karen didn't know the full story, and if she did, I was afraid of how she'd react. Would she try to sabotage the deal? Would she think I was trying to use my family to gain an advantage? At that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I was walking a tightrope and I couldn't afford to fall. The next few days would determine not only the future of the deal but my future in the company. And with Karen breathing down my neck, it felt like the stakes couldn't be higher. Would I manage to keep the truth hidden long enough to close the deal, or would everything come crashing down before I even had the chance to prove myself? The days following my conversation with James were a blur of meetings, emails, and tense encounters with Karen. It felt like every moment was building towards something, but I couldn't figure out exactly what. Each time I passed her in the hallway, I could feel her eyes on me, sharp and calculating. She seemed to be waiting for something, perhaps waiting for me to slip up, to reveal too much about myself or the deal. Every time I had to interact with her, I had to remind myself to keep my cool, but deep down I was starting to wonder how much longer I could keep up the facade. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, staring at the contract for the deal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I had sent over all the necessary paperwork, and had even received confirmation from James that the terms were acceptable. Everything seemed to be moving smoothly, but I felt this nagging sense of impending doom. Was it just the stress? Or was Karen up to something? I couldn't tell. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was James. Hey, he said, his voice unusually tense. I got a call from your office this morning. Karen mentioned something about wanting to change some of the deal terms. What's going on? I froze. She said what? Yeah, apparently she wants to renegotiate some of the clauses that were already agreed on, he explained. That's not the agreement we discussed. Is everything all right over there? I felt my heart drop. Karen was playing games. She was trying to throw a wrench into the works. I couldn't understand why she was doing this. Was she that threatened by me? Or was there something else at play? James, I don't know what she's up to, but I'll handle it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll talk to her and straighten things out. Don't let her mess with you, he warned. If she's trying to pull something, you know I'll back you up. I hung up, but his words only added to the pressure. What if Karen was trying to undermine me because of the family connection? What if she saw this as an opportunity to prove she was in control, even if it meant jeopardizing a major deal? Or maybe it was something deeper. I decided to confront Karen the next morning. I had no choice. This was spiraling out of my control, and I needed to put an end to it before things got worse. I found her in her office, staring at her computer screen. She didn't even look up when I entered. Karen, I began, trying to sound calm. We need to talk about the deal. Her eyes flicked up briefly, then back down to her screen. What about it? James called me. He said you're trying to change the terms after we already agreed on them. Why? I didn't try to hide the frustration in my voice. She didn't seem surprised. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, a smug look crossing her face. I just thought we should tweak a few things. Maybe make the deal more favorable for us. Keep things balanced. Balanced? I echoed, my voice rising slightly. You're jeopardizing everything we've worked on. This isn't just about a few clauses. You're trying to undermine me. She finally looked at me, her eyes cold and calculating. What are you talking about? She asked, but I could tell she already knew exactly what I meant. Stop pretending like you don't know, I said, unable to keep the anger from seeping into my words. You're doing this because of my family, aren't you? You're trying to sabotage this deal because you think I'm getting special treatment. Well, you're wrong. She stood up from her chair, the icy air between us thickening. You think I care about your family? I don't. But you're not playing by the rules. This is business, not some family favor. You're making it personal, and that's not something I can tolerate. I could see her trying to maintain control, but there was a crack in her voice. For a second, I thought she might actually show some vulnerability, but she quickly masked it again with a defiant stance. I'm not going to let you throw this deal away because of your family drama, she added, her voice low and fierce. If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you're not cut out for this. I stared at her for a long moment, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. How did she think she could talk to me like this and still expect me to back down? She didn't know the whole story, and I wasn't about to let her keep making these assumptions about me. You don't know anything about me, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You don't get to decide who's cut out for this. I'm here because I've worked for it, and I'm not going to let you destroy it. For a moment there was silence between us. She glared at me, but I stood my ground. Finally, she broke the silence with a forced laugh. You're not as tough as you think, are you? She said. You think you've got it all figured out, but trust me, I'm not the one who'll ruin this deal. You will. The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was trying to manipulate me, trying to get under my skin, trying to make me doubt myself. But I couldn't let her. I turned on my heel and left her office without another word. The entire interaction felt like a battle, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was winning or losing. Later that evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at the contract on my desk again. Karen's words echoed in my mind, but I couldn't afford to second-guess myself now. This deal had to happen for my future and for my family. But how much longer could I keep this secret about James and I from spilling out? And when it did, how would Karen react? Would she still try to bring me down, or would she back off when she realized who I was really working for? The next morning, I got a text from James. I heard Karen's been causing some trouble. Don't let her get to you. I smiled at his message but knew deep down that things were about to get a lot more complicated. The storm was only just beginning. The next few days felt like I was walking on a razor's edge. Every time I stepped into the office, I could feel Karen's eyes on me, watching my every move. I was doing my best to stay professional, but the pressure was building. It wasn't just the deal anymore. It was about proving to her and to myself that I wasn't just some pawn in a corporate game. And yet I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was about to explode. I had sent over the final documents for the deal, hoping everything would go smoothly, but I had a sinking feeling in my gut. Karen was making it clear that she wasn't going to let it go so easily. Every time we interacted, it was like she was trying to bait me into making a mistake. I could feel the tension growing between us, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she would find a way to strike. I decided to check in with James again. I couldn't let him think everything was fine when I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. As soon as he picked up, I didn't hold back. Karen is playing games, I said, my voice tight with frustration. She's pushing back on the deal, trying to change everything. I think she's trying to sabotage it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before James spoke. She's always been like that, he said quietly. But you have to remember, you're not alone in this. I'm here and I'll make sure we get this done. Just don't let her get to you. I nodded even though I wasn't sure I believed him. It wasn't just Karen anymore. It felt like there were so many things stacked against me. My boss, the secret about my brother, the pressure to deliver on a $5 million deal, and the constant fear that something would go wrong at the worst possible moment. The stakes had never been higher. That afternoon, Karen called me into her office. The look on her face was different from usual. She was calm, too calm, almost like she was waiting for me to break. As I walked in, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The atmosphere in the room felt thick with tension. Sit down, she said, her tone icy. I hesitated but did as she asked. What's this about? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen didn't waste time with pleasantries. I've been doing some thinking about this deal, she said. And I think it's time you and I had a little talk about your priorities. My heart skipped a beat. The last time she'd said something like that, it had been a warning. And now it felt like the moment of truth was finally upon us. I've been patient with you, she continued. But I don't think I can trust you with this deal anymore. You've got too many conflicts of interest, too much personal stuff tying you to the situation. And frankly, it's making me question your judgment. I could feel my pulse quicken. She was onto me. But how much did she really know? Did she suspect who James was? Or was she just making assumptions based on my sudden shift in behavior? I don't know what you mean, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. This is a business deal, Karen. I've done everything by the book. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Don't play dumb with me. I've been watching you closely. The way you act around James, the way you're suddenly so invested in this deal. It's obvious to me that you're trying to use your family to get ahead. I froze, my mind racing. She was wrong, but I couldn't just admit to her what she suspected. That's not it, I said quickly, my voice shaking slightly. This is my work, Karen. You've seen what I can do. I've worked hard for this. She didn't seem convinced. You think I don't see what's happening here? You've been using your connection with him to manipulate the situation. You're trying to control this deal from the inside out. My chest tightened as I realized what she was implying. She thought I was using my brother's position to push the deal forward, and if she went public with that, it could ruin everything. The trust I'd worked so hard to build, the career I had been trying to establish, it would all come crashing down. I'm not doing anything wrong, I said, trying to keep the panic from creeping into my voice. James has no idea what's going on with this deal. I've kept everything professional. Karen's gaze hardened. I'm not buying it. You think you can just keep lying to me? You think you're smarter than me? This is where it ends. I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I was struggling to keep my composure. If she went ahead with this, everything would be over. The deal would fall apart, my reputation would be destroyed, and I'd lose everything. But then, just as I thought things couldn't get worse, Karen dropped a bombshell. I've already spoken to the board, she said, her voice low and deliberate. They're not happy with the way things are going. They don't like the conflict of interest, and they're considering pulling the plug on this deal unless we can correct the course. My mind raced. This was it. The deal was on the verge of collapse, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. If the board found out the truth, I was done for. You're making a mistake, I said, my voice barely a whisper. This deal is worth millions, Karen. You can't just throw it away. But she didn't seem to care. She was already moving toward the door, a satisfied look on her face. I'm doing what's best for the company. And you better start thinking about what's best for you. As she walked out, I sat there in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The pressure, the secrets, the betrayals, everything was about to come to a head. And I had no idea how it would end. Would I lose everything, or could I somehow turn the tables before it was too late? As I sat there, the door clicking shut behind Karen, the weight of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. The board was involved now. And I knew there was no way I could explain my way out of this without exposing my biggest secret. It felt like the walls were closing in. I had spent so long trying to keep my family ties hidden, but now it seemed like they were going to be the very thing that would destroy me. I had to act quickly. But just as I reached for my phone to call James, there was a knock at my door. I tensed, unsure who it could be. It was too soon for another confrontation with Karen, and I couldn't risk dealing with her again. But when I opened the door, I was met not with Karen, but with someone I didn't expect. One of the company's top executives, Greg. Can I come in? He asked, his voice steady but with an underlying tension. There was something in his eyes that made my stomach turn, but I stepped aside, unsure of what he wanted. As soon as the door shut behind us, Greg didn't waste any time. You've got a problem, he said bluntly, his tone serious. I immediately felt a chill run through me. What do you mean? Karen's not just playing a personal game here, he said, looking around to make sure no one was listening. I've been hearing some things, and I think it's time someone told you the truth. I frowned. What things? Greg hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice dropping even lower. Karen's got an agenda, but she's not doing it for the company's benefit. She's been working behind the scenes with one of the other board members trying to take over. They've been trying to manipulate the deal to their advantage, and they plan to use your family connection against you to push you out of the picture. I froze. It was a gut punch I hadn't been prepared for. I had always assumed Karen's behavior was personal, based on jealousy, competition, maybe even a bit of spite. But this was different. She wasn't just undermining me. She was orchestrating a power play, and I was right in the middle of it. So what does this have to do with me? I asked, trying to steady my breathing. They're using you as leverage, Greg replied, his eyes narrowing. They've been setting you up as the scapegoat. If the deal falls apart, they'll blame you, your family, your conflict of interest, and you'll be the one to take the fall. They know it'll ruin you and your reputation, and they'll be able to swoop in and seize control. A rush of panic surged through me. But why? Why target me? Why not just go for the deal? Because Greg said, his voice tense, they want more than just the deal. They want power. Karen and her partner have been working in the shadows, trying to manipulate the board for months. They think that if they can get rid of you, they can control the entire company. And they think your family is their ticket to making it happen. I could hardly wrap my mind around it. I had been so focused on Karen's personal animosity, on trying to protect my job in the deal, that I hadn't considered the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the deal. This was about the company itself, and the ruthless power plays going on behind the scenes. You're telling me this now? I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I didn't know who to trust, Greg admitted, looking at the ground for a moment before meeting my eyes. But after seeing how far Karen is willing to go, I figured it was time you knew. You're walking into a storm, and I don't think Karen will stop unless she's exposed. I took a step back, trying to absorb everything he just told me. I had thought I was fighting one battle, but now I realized I was caught in the middle of a corporate war I had no idea how to fight. And the worst part? It was my own family that was being used as the pawn. What do I do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You have to beat her at her own game, Greg said, his voice low. Find out who's backing her. Expose the power play. But you can't let her control the narrative. You have to turn this around before she does. I felt the weight of his words settle over me. Exposing Karen and her partner wouldn't be easy, but I had no choice. If I didn't act fast, everything I had worked for, the deal, my career, my reputation, would be gone. But just as I was about to ask Greg for more details, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, my eyes scanning the message. It was from James. We need to talk. It's urgent. I've got something you need to know about the deal. The timing couldn't have been worse. The storm was picking up, and I didn't know if I could handle both Karen's sabotage and whatever James was about to drop on me. I looked up at Greg, who was watching me closely. I need to go, I said, quickly grabbing my things. But we'll talk again soon, okay? Greg nodded, but there was no comfort in his eyes. Be careful. Karen's playing dirty, and she'll stop at nothing to win. As I walked out of my office and into the hallway, my heart was racing. I had a bad feeling about this, but I couldn't ignore James's message. Whatever he had to say, it was clear the stakes had just been raised. The deeper I got into this, the more I realized how much was on the line. It wasn't just my job. It wasn't even just the deal anymore. If I couldn't outsmart Karen and figure out what James knew, I could lose everything, including the family that I had tried so hard to protect. And as I headed to meet James, I couldn't help but wonder, was I walking straight into a trap? I met James at a small cafe just a few blocks away from the office. The place was quiet, perfect for a confidential conversation. As soon as I sat down, I could see the tension in his face. He wasn't his usual calm, collected self. He was visibly agitated, and I knew this wasn't just about the deal. "I know what's going on," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But there's something you need to know that changes everything." I felt my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "Karen is being controlled by someone," James continued, his gaze darting around the cafe nervously. "I've been doing some digging and I found out who her backer is. It's not just about the board. She's been working for someone else the entire time, someone with far more influence than you or I." My heart skipped a beat. "Who?" James hesitated. It's your father." I blinked, struggling to process his words. "What? That's impossible. My father has nothing to do with this company." James's eyes met mine, his expression serious. "He does now. I found documents showing that your father had been negotiating with Karen for months. She's been working for him this whole time, trying to gain control of the company from within. He wanted to use the deal to secure a bigger stake, but he couldn't do it without manipulating the situation, and that's where you came in." The weight of his revelation hit me like a wave, knocking the breath out of me. My father had been behind this whole thing? I couldn't believe it. My father, the man I had always respected and trusted, had been pulling strings in the background, using me as a pawn in his game. I felt betrayed, confused, and furious all at once. How could he? Why didn't he tell me? James leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "He knew it would never work if you found out. He needed to keep you in the dark so you wouldn't question his intentions. But now you're in too deep, and he's counting on you to fix this mess. The only way to end this is to confront him head on." The shock of everything I had learned was almost too much to handle, but I knew I couldn't back down. I had to find my father and get to the bottom of this. I had no idea what his endgame was or how deep this betrayal went, but I couldn't let Karen or anyone else take advantage of me. I excused myself from the cafe and immediately went to call my father, but my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Greg. "We need to talk," it said. "There's something you don't know." I didn't know if I could handle another bombshell, but I was already too far in to turn back now. I texted back, "Where?" He gave me a location, a warehouse on the outskirts of town, and told me to come alone. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't ignore him. I had to figure out what was really happening. I drove there, my mind racing. The tension had been building for so long, and now it felt like I was walking into the final showdown. When I arrived, the warehouse was eerily quiet. I got out of the car, heart pounding, and made my way inside. The lights flickered on as soon as I stepped through the door. There, standing in the middle of the room, was Greg. But behind him, standing in the shadows, was someone I hadn't expected to see. It was my father. I stopped dead in my tracks, my mind spinning. What was he doing here? Why was he working with Greg? "Dad," my voice came out shaky, filled with disbelief. "What's going on? Why didn't you tell me?" He stepped forward, his face grim. "I didn't want to get you involved, but it's too late now. You're in the middle of something far bigger than you realize." Greg nodded, looking at me with a strange look in his eyes. "Your father and I have been working together. We needed to make sure the deal went through, and we needed someone on the inside, someone who could get close to Karen." I stared at them both in shock. My father, the man I thought I knew, had been orchestrating this whole thing. But why? What was the real purpose? "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's the endgame? Why did you let me be a part of this?" Greg chuckled softly, his tone dark. "Because in the end we knew you'd be the one to fix everything. You're the key to making this deal work. But you needed to learn the truth before it was too late." Before I could process his words, a sudden realization hit me. All this time I thought I was trying to protect my family's interests, but it was my father who had been pulling the strings all along. The deal wasn't just about money. It was about control, about consolidating power within the company, about ensuring his legacy was secured. But as I stood there, facing both Greg and my father, a new feeling rose within me. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about breaking free from the lies, about reclaiming my own future. And then, just when I thought the story couldn't get any more complicated, Greg smiled. A slow, calculating grin that made my blood run cold. "There's just one more thing you need to know," he said. "Karen isn't working for your father. She's been working for me." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked at Greg, my mind struggling to comprehend what he had just said. You're the one behind this?" Greg's smile widened, revealing a glimmer of triumph in his eyes. "You never saw it coming, did you? This entire time I've been playing both sides. And now, with your father distracted, I'm the one who's going to walk away with everything." I felt the ground shift beneath me. It wasn't just a corporate game anymore. It was a battle for power. A battle I had been unwittingly dragged into. My father, Karen, Greg, they had all been using me as a pawn. And now it was time for me to make my move. The only question was, who could I trust? And what price was I willing to pay to take control of my own fate? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in way over my head. The walls were closing in, and every move I made seemed to draw me further into this web of lies, betrayal, and ruthless ambition. Karen's scheme was bad enough, but now I had to face the fact that I couldn't trust anyone, not even James, who had always been my ally. As I walked through the parking garage, heading to the spot where I was supposed to meet him, my mind raced. What could James possibly know that would change everything? What new bombshell was he about to drop? I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, and the tension in the air felt suffocating. When I finally spotted him leaning against his car, I couldn't help but notice how grim he looked. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of worry and urgency. Something was wrong. "You came," he said quietly as I approached. "Good. What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but the anxiety was creeping in. James looked around cautiously before speaking, his voice low. "I've been doing some digging, and I found something that changes everything. You've been played." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" "Karen isn't the only one pulling strings here. There's someone else behind all of this. Someone you wouldn't expect." He paused, his eyes dark with suspicion. "It's your father. He's the one who's been orchestrating the whole thing." I froze. The world seemed to tilt. My father? The man who had always been the rock in my life? I couldn't wrap my head around it. "What do you mean?" "My father has nothing to do with this. He's just a businessman. He would never." "Listen to me," James interrupted, his voice urgent. "I've seen the evidence. He's been working with Karen's partner from the board. They've been manipulating everything behind the scenes. This isn't just about a business deal anymore. Your father's playing a bigger game and you're in the middle of it." I took a step back, the shock of his words knocking the air from my lungs. "But why would he do that? Why would he bring me into this?" "Because," James said, his voice laced with bitterness, "he wants control. He's been trying to position himself to take over the company, and he's been using you as a pawn to do it. The only way for him to secure his power was to have you in the middle of the deal, whether you liked it or not." The ground beneath me felt like it was shifting. My family, the people I had trusted most in the world, were now the very people I had to watch out for. It was too much. "No, this isn't real. My father wouldn't do that. He wouldn't put me in harm's way." "Then explain this," James said, holding up his phone. He turned the screen toward me and my blood ran cold. It was a series of encrypted messages between my father and the same board member who had been secretly working with Karen. The messages were clear. They were making plans, manipulating the deal to their advantage, and using my family connection as leverage. My hands shook as I took in the evidence. It felt like the ground was slipping away from under me. My father, the man who I thought was my protector, was now my biggest threat. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I can't believe this." James put a hand on my shoulder, his expression softer now. "You've got to be strong. You've got to make a choice, and it can't be based on who you think you should trust. It has to be about who you really are, what you want for yourself." His words echoed in my mind, and for a moment, I could only stare at the messages. There were no easy answers here, no quick fixes. My family was torn apart, and I had no idea who the real enemy was anymore. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I don't know if I can take down my own father. But I can't let Karen win. I can't let them destroy everything." James nodded, his face set in grim determination. "You don't have to take down your father, but you have to stop him. And you need to expose Karen for what she really is before it's too late." I nodded, trying to steady myself. The road ahead was unclear, but there was one thing I knew for sure. This wasn't just about a corporate deal anymore. It was about power, loyalty, and the truth. And it was time for me to take control of my own fate. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice resolute. "But I need to know everything. I need to know what I'm really up against." James looked at me, a shadow crossing his face. "Then get ready. Because what comes next will change everything." The moment I'd been dreading had arrived. The time to act was now. My family, my career, and my future were all on the line. But as I walked away from James, heading back to the office, I realized one thing. The storm had only just begun.